Maya is a very broad and powerful 3D application, and at the beginning it can be difficult to know where to start. Let's get started by looking at Maya's interface. So when we first start up Maya, we'll get this What's New pop-up. Here lets you know that anything that's new in this particular version of Maya will be highlighted in green. That'll come into play later as we look at some of the new features in Maya 2020. We'll go ahead and say OK to close the window. Now, as we look around the interface, you'll notice a lot of things that are common to other software applications, and we won't spend too much time on those. You'll see there's a menu at the top with lots of different items. Now, I want you to notice that the first portion of these menus will stay consistent, but we can change the rest of the menus based on the type of work that we're going to be doing. Right now, you can see that this is set to modeling, so that means we're using our modeling menu set. If we click on the dropdown, we can change this to rigging, for instance, and you can see that some of the menu items change. We also have animation, effects, and so on. Now, the menus usually aren't going to be the quickest place to find the tools that you need, but if you're looking for something, you can definitely find it in the menus. As we click on these menus, you can see that some of the items are green. As we talked about before, this means they're new to Maya 2020. You can see here, we've got our Bifrost browser and graph editor, which we'll talk about in a later lesson. If we come over to mesh, you can see we've got remesh and retopologize listed in green. We'll talk about those later as well. Now, as we move to the right, you can see there's a place for workspaces. This is another way to customize what you're looking at based on what kind of work that you want to be doing. So right now it's set to Maya Classic, but if you wanted to do some sculpting, we could set it to sculpting workspace, and that would change the interface based on the best options for sculpting. You can see all of those different options we have here, and you can also create your own. Let's go back to Maya Classic. As we move down, the line that contains our menu set dropdown is the status line, and this contains a lot of common tools that we'll be using, very basic general tools like saving, opening files. We've got component and object modes. We've got snapping options. As we move to the right, symmetry options. We've also got our rendering options here, as you can see based on the slate part of the icon. We've got our account. And then if we move all the way over to the right, we've got our sidebar icons. These indicate different parts of the interface that we can quickly open. So from left to right, we can open our modeling toolkit, which you can see opens here on the right side. We've also got our character tools. We can open our attribute editor, and our tool settings will open in another window. As we move down below the status line, you'll see a row of icons and a bunch of tabs. This is the shelf, and this is where we can have commonly used tools. So we have a bunch already populated, but we can also add the tools that we use most often. Here we've got the poly modeling shelf activated, but we can just click on the tab to activate sculpting, rigging, animation, and so forth. Just another way to quickly access tools that we need. As we move over here to the right, you can see that there are some tabs on the far right, and this will let you choose what we're seeing on this right part of the screen. By default, you can see this is set to channel box/layer editor. The channel box is going to be up here at the top, layer editor down on the bottom. In order to see this a little bit better, I'm going to quickly create an object. So we'll go to the poly modeling shelf, and I'm just going to click on the sphere. As you can see here, the sphere is in our viewport, which we'll talk about in a second, but it also comes up in our channel box. This gives us all of the transforms for this particular sphere, also the name of the sphere, and any history or inputs that we have here on our sphere. We can also activate the attribute editor. You can roll down any of these menus to see more information based on that particular section. We'll go back to the channel box layer editor. As we move down, we've got all of the animation controls here on the bottom. So we've got a time slider showing how many frames we're seeing. We've got a range slider that we can change so that the view of the frames changes. We've also got our playback controls and our settings to change the animation settings for our project. Moving over here to the left, we've got our quick layout and outliner buttons. And so what these will do is change what we're looking at here in our viewport. Here we can see we can change this to a 4 view versus a single view. We can also open our outliner, as you can see here. As we move up, we've got our toolbox, and these are going to be our transform tools. So here we've got our selection tool. We can also choose lasso tool, paint selection, move, rotate, and scale. You can see the hotkeys for these also listed on the upper right as we hover over these. That's another great thing about Maya. If there's any icon and you're not sure what tool it is, you can always hover over that and you'll get more information about it. You can see here for move, the hotkey is W. For rotate, it's E. And for scale, it's R. And lastly, we come to our viewport or our view panel here in the center. This is where we're going to see all of the objects and all of the great things that we create here in Maya. You can see that there's a large open space. We've got a grid in the center. There's our geometry in the middle, just a sphere for right now. We also have a menu specifically for this view panel. So we've got view, shading, we can change how things look. We can change it to wireframe, back to smooth shading. And a lot of these are duplicated in these icons right below the menu as well. You can see here, we can change these, and there are hotkeys for these as well. To navigate around our view panel, we're going to use the Alt key. To orbit around our model, we'll hold down the Alt key and use our left mouse button. That will allow us to orbit around our scene. If we use the Alt key and our middle mouse button, we can pan across our scene. If we use the Alt key and the right mouse button, we can move in and out. So by keeping our finger on the Alt key and changing the mouse button that we're using, we can very quickly move in and out and around our scene, navigate around the projects that we're creating. If you use the spacebar, you can toggle between this large single view that we have here to 4 smaller views. You can see here we have top, front, side, and our original perspective view. To maximize any of these views, all we have to do is hover the mouse over one of the views and hit the spacebar again. That will maximize that particular viewport. Spacebar again will bring us back to our 4 views, and then we can go back to our perspective view. Another great key to keep in mind is if you have an object and it gets off screen, and you know you have it selected, but you want to center it back on your viewport, you can hit the F key, as in Frank. That will frame your object back in the center of your view panel. So that's a quick look at the interface in Maya. There are a lot of different ways to access the tools that you'll need, and you'll learn to use the ones that work best for you. For instance, right-clicking will give you a number of options and tools that you can access right where your cursor is. You've also got the hotbox by hitting the spacebar, which will let you access menus very, very quickly. You've also got hotkeys, which will allow you to access tools even more quickly. So lots of different ways to access the tools that you need, and you'll get used to those as you use Maya more and more.